Que lo que mi gente, welcome to the Monoplaza F1 podcast. As always, I'm your host, Emir Tre. And with me today is another special and illustrious guest, because I only bring the best, taking this international as always, from the Entrando A Pits podcast, co-host and co-founder we have, Emmanuel Medrano. Medrano, how's it going, man?
Hey man, how's it going? Yeah, I could keep up with that presentation. Hopefully, I will not let you down. But yeah, thank you for having me. Pretty happy to be here. And yeah, I'm not a co-founder. I'm just someone that Vince just found out over there, and it's like, hey, when I just do some shit talking with me about Formula One, and yeah, that's what I do. But yeah, thank you for that.
No, you know what? You know why I'm gonna give you co-founder status, even if Vince doesn't give you co-founder status,
Oh
is
man.
because whenever Vince is not there, you know who's running the show?
Oh, who's
Medrano.
that? Who would that be?
That would be you, sir. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, I believe so.
So take
Yeah,
it.
I play that role sometimes. You're right.
No, man, but let's get into it. Again, thank you so much for coming on. For
Thank
those
you.
who don't know, this is actually crazy because Medrano actually just got done doing a live, and where he's at, it's actually really late. So I'm actually really happy that he was able to make it. And so I know you're gonna say thank you back, but really, really, really thank you for coming on. And with that, let's get started. So the second annual Las Vegas Grand Prix. Um, I'm not gonna lie. Last year it was an interesting race. I wasn't hoping for a lot this year. I will say that here in the United States, it's at a weird time. All right, so like it's 2 hours behind from where I live, but the schedule does not make any sense at all. Like it's still late. So for me, it's like if I was watching a race in Japan or China or Australia, but it's here in the United States. That being said, the race for me delivered. And before I get into it, I want to get your thoughts. What did you think overall about the Las Vegas Grand Prix, starting with anything that stood out, whether it was qualifying, the race itself? What did you think, I guess, about the Las Vegas Grand Prix?
Yeah, I believe, and it's pretty important to mention and do like the comparison with last year's GP because you know I think they stood up, hardly on the event itself. Last year we had some issues whether there was some fans that they were taken out of the circuit because of X reason.
Mm-hmm.
We got the signs issue with
Oh,
that
the
whole
manhole
in
cover. Yeah, yeah.
exactly with the cover and the so this year was kind of, well, I mean, we got other issues, of course, as per Checo, Franco, Verstappen, but at least the fans, they were, they seems like they got what they deserve, what they paid for. It was actually a great race, actually. A lot of great performances, and Max Verstappen claiming his fourth world title in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
All shiny, all bright. Like in Las Vegas. So yeah, it was a great race.
I so I'm gonna agree with you. The race was, I will say, this year more than last year, I think the drivers were more adapted to the temperature and the driving that was required for Las Vegas. So last year, it was a lot of complaints about it's too cold, we don't have any grips. And I don't know if you remember turn one last year, it was crazy scenes. It was like bowling. All the cars just kind of like went off together in turn one. This
Yeah.
year, you saw times that were significantly faster than last year. I think they got the fastest time during FP1, and I actually didn't know that until I was watching the live with you guys, where they got 135. I think Hamilton got down to 135, and that was already faster than any fastest time last year. So yeah, it was good. I will say the only thing that's kind of weird is that I don't like that Vegas has a cool down, or like it doesn't have a cool down room. So they all get into the car and they all
Yeah.
drive, and it feels like Uber, right? Like it feels like they all got into an Uber X, and then they just, so that part was weird. 100%, you're right about Checo again not making out of Q1. There's not a lot to say there, right? Because yeah,
New
what what
normal.
what can
Yeah.
you say about Checo that hasn't been said already in terms
Exactly.
of his performance,
He's just
right?
not letting us down. He's just keeping up with that. So
And then Colapinto, Yeah, we're gonna talk about Colapinto in a second, but the first thing I want to start with is Max Verstappen winning the fourth consecutive championship. I have said on the show many times, I am not someone who considers themselves a fan of Max Verstappen. That being said, I have to give credit where credit is due. In
Yeah.
a season where it wasn't like 2023, people were winning races. You had multiple race winners. Everybody was winning except for his teammate Checo, who still has not won a race and probably won't win a race. I'm not even gonna go there. Um, I thought it was an exciting season. I thought that Max Verstappen was able to capitalize on everything that he needed in order to win. So first and foremost, congratulations to the champ, Max Verstappen. It feels weird coming out of my mouth because again, I'm not a Max Verstappen fan, but I got to give credit where credit is due. So I guess let's go. Not even just Las Vegas. What do you think about Verstappen's performance throughout the year to seal this fourth World Driver Championship?
Yeah, and I truly believe that this is what he needed because of, yeah, we all know what happened back in 2021, right? And a lot of controversy, and we're not even gonna get there. But then 2022 and 23 were years in which, in which he basically dominated, and it was pretty easy to him, right? I mean, not even from his teammate, which had the same machinery.
Mm-hmm.
So he got no resistance at all, and he needed this type of challenge to actually prove to himself and to the world, the class of a champion that he is. And I believe that it is a great time to be alive. It is actually a great time to be watching Formula One because I am also, like yourself, a big Lewis Hamilton fan. I'm always, I've always sympathized with Max Verstappen just because of the attitude, what he has shown since day one, since Spain 2016,
Mm-hmm.
and I know a lot of people they don't get this, but I like to say that in a way, if you are a truly Lewis Hamilton fan, and what I mean by truly Lewis Hamilton fan is not just the Hamilton from 2017 onwards, it's actually the complete Lewis Hamilton, which is the one. Because if you observe and you actually compare um, 2007 Lewis Hamilton, 2008, 2009, the Lewis Hamilton that had some hot moments with Felipe Massa, with
Yep.
Alonso,
Yep.
it's not pretty far off from what we have seen from Verstappen. And that's why we had you know, that intense battle in 2021. And I believe that Max Verstappen, as I was saying, needed this kind of year because, it represented a little bit of sweat to him.
Mm.
He actually delivered when it mattered.
Yep.
Um, he showed what he's built off against not only Lando. It was against a bunch of drivers because we're having a season that you cannot predict who's going to win in Qatar, for example, who's going to win it in Abu Dhabi. Who could have said that Mercedes would get a 1-2 by this weekend? Um, I was asked in our last episode, for example,
Yeah. Yeah.
as a Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton fan, Medrano, what are you expecting from Mercedes? And I was like, no, I mean, I just got a small chance because of the temperatures. And
Yep.
actually, I just hit the jackpot right there, but I wasn't pretty even sure about that. So, yeah, I mean, impressive performance from Max Verstappen. He had so little room for mistakes, and he actually didn't do any mistake. And Brazil was impressive, to be able to put that car, and manage the gap against Lando. The type of battle that he showed us, which is typical Verstappen, of
Of
course,
course. Yeah.
and actually dealing with more things, more controversy, whether that's FIA, whether that's media, whether that's
The
people
team.
shit talking, and a lot of stuff, and then he just handled that pressure pretty well because it's not only the things that we see, you know. Uh, in the circuit, in the race, it's what is outside as well. It's the mental strength that you need to actually yeah, show that you're capable of being a champion, and that's some things that others are missing. Not to say Lando and some people. So yeah,
Es-
I mean, hats
especially
down to
Lando.
Verstappen.
Yeah, and so yes, I am going to call Lando out. I'm not in a big way. So he did everything you had to do needed to win. His rival, um, I don't even know if for the most part was Lando. I don't know if you could call Lando really a rival. Rival, I think, is someone who is competing with him, who you really have to pay attention to. I'm not sure there was a point where Verstappen was actually worried about Lando. So, for instance, we go back to 2021. He was taking the fight to Lewis. They went down to the last race. They were tied in points. Completely different scenario. Probably one of his toughest, if not the toughest championship he had to win. Controversy aside. Now, especially when you say like he had to do and maximize, capitalize everything. Going into this weekend, you're absolutely right. It was like very unpredictable because Red Bull came to Las Vegas with the wrong rear wing, right? So not only that, I thought personally, I thought Red Bull like okay, they're gonna have to decide this in Qatar because when you were watching like the free practices, Verstappen is 17th, Verstappen is 16th, whatever he was, and obviously once he got to qualifying, at that point, Red Bull had literally so there's this it's like they took like a craft store and just cut the shape out, which
Yeah, it was
was
like a trimmer, so like a drill, something like that.
and so that by the way that's kind of it was kind of weird to me because I felt like you couldn't DHL the rear wing to Las Vegas in less than 24 hours. Anyways, it doesn't matter. So he was able to capitalize. The team was able to do that with no help, by the way, from
Hmm.
Checo. At any point this year, Max never had any help. He did what he had to do in the beginning, won 7 races in a row. And I'm going to be honest with you. I appreciate the term, what a time to be alive in F1 now at this point in the season. Because I don't know what you thought at the beginning of the season. I thought it was going to be
Yeah.
2023 all over
Oh
again. I
yeah.
was like, okay, this is going to be boring. I have no idea like what I'm
Hmm.
going to talk about, blah, 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 this, that, and the third. Uh, but from Miami onward, you just see, okay, now it's starting to get exciting. McLaren's bringing upgrades. They're catching up. Lewis Hamilton randomly wins here. Lewis Hamilton randomly wins in Spa.
Yeah.
George Russell capitalizes in Austria, right? And so I was like, okay, okay. But at no point in the season, so yeah, I'm congratulating Max. I'm saying all that, but at no point in the season did I feel like Lando Norris was a legitimate challenge to Max.
Yeah, and I should agree with that because at the beginning, I remember that I said in Miami specifically that it was just a proof that Red Bull that they were human, because before that, it's like they were ETs, they were androids,
Straight
some
up
like
aliens. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like they were untouchable, right? And then in Miami was the first time that we saw, what, these guys, they could lose, losing is almost a possibility to them, and this is good to know. And then yeah, the rest is just, yeah, history, I would say. So yeah.
And so, with that, I will say, it pains me to say it again. Congratulations, Max Verstappen. Yeah. So my my I'm a hater, man. I'm sorry. My next question to you, I want to know is this Max Verstappen's last championship with Red Bull, last championship ever? You talked about all the controversy that Max had to deal with at the beginning of the season, right? With Horner and all the allegations against Horner. Then his father, Jos Verstappen, openly criticizing Horner. Then the fallout with Helmut Marko. Max never let that distract him. But the rumor now is circulating, obviously, it has been all year, that Max is not going to renew with Red Bull when his contract is up. He's going to go to Mercedes. Some people are saying maybe Aston Martin. I don't think he'll go to Aston Martin, but whatever.
Yeah.
So my question to you is the Adrian Newey curse going to follow Max Verstappen? Is this 4 championships and he's done? Or do you think he's going to continue winning either with Red Bull or with another team he may join in the future?
Yeah, and great question, and I hope not to be put in the spot right there, but I so when you see these kind of drivers, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you see this type of drivers like once every, I don't know, 10 years, right? We got Lewis Hamilton, for example. We got Sebastian Vettel, and then you got Max Verstappen, right?
Yep.
And then you got
Yep. Yep.
them, like within an 8 to 10 years scope or frame,
Mm.
and I can actually not think of Max Verstappen not being competitive, not winning, because as soon as you give him a car, then that is capable of at least achieving podiums, you need to believe that the guy has the ability to put the car probably to win, whether
Yeah.
that is a Red Bull, a Mercedes, whatever the car it is. So based on that, I would say it's pretty difficult to judge and to say that Max Verstappen is not going to win another world title.
Mm.
Um, Now, the fact of that fifth championship being won at Red Bull, it's in big jeopardy because I don't know, man. I mean, if you take what we have seen from Red Bull in this last part of the season,
Mm.
right, when they started to fall off, they are not even able to deal with the Checo Perez situation, for example.
Nope.
They're not even, they were not so quick on turning things around. If we can consider they have or they had turned them around, which I don't believe they had actually, because Checo's still not making it into Q2. And it's not a good metric actually to take Checo. And I feel for my fellow Mexican friends, but when you see Verstappen not winning races, when you see Verstappen qualifying fifth, staying fifth, right, not being able to keep up with other cars, with the Ferraris, with Hamilton, for example, um, and then you kind of stretch that into the next season,
Mm.
in which other teams are doing pretty good job. You cannot discard Mercedes, for example, but for 2025, I believe Ferrari, even with Hamilton joining in and having that um, process at the beginning, they're going to be a key factor for next year. They are truly developing for next year. McLaren as well, and you don't know who else, right? We're closing. We're getting to the end of the regulations,
Mm.
and then
Yep.
we all know that things tend to get mixed up and tied up right at the end.
Yes.
And yeah, if Verstappen is gonna win it on 2025, which I'm not sure, it's going to be pretty heavy because the drivers that you might have fighting with him right now, they're gonna come next year with more experience. Even Lando, and then and it's a fresh start, right? It's from zero all over again with better cars, I would say, at least at the first venue. So yeah, it's gonna be pretty difficult. I would not say that, difficult to say. I don't believe that this is his last title, but probably with Red Bull, I don't see him probably winning next year.
I agree. I don't see him winning next year for the simple reason that now everybody understand. Everybody, let me stop. Everybody except for Mercedes understands the ground effect because even this right, like even this weekend, Mercedes they knew that the car was fast because it was cold, but they don't really understand like how
Exactly.
to translate that elsewhere. So everybody but Mercedes understands
Yeah.
what needs to happen with that. In terms of Checo, yeah, obviously the car is not performing in the same way. The driver is not performing in the same way. So yes, I agree with you there. Other teams catching up because this is the last year of the ground effect regulations. 100%, it's not going to be easy. I don't think he wins next year. I don't know who wins next year, but I don't think it's going to be Verstappen for the simple reason that the RB20 this year had so many issues, and I think you're right. They do not know what's going on. They can't advance that car any further. The team has done so well that they're losing a lot of talent to other teams,
Wow. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So brain drain, same thing happened over at Mercedes, same thing happened every time a win is or a team is really successful, people want people from that team. How many Red Bull guys went to Aston Martin? How many Red Bull guys went to McLaren? How many Red Bull
Yeah.
guys, right? So that's that. I don't see it, but I am excited about next year. I'm actually ready for the ground effect era to be over, but yeah, only because I want to see what engine mode is happening. So you brought up Ferrari, so I'm moving on with Ferrari. I guess my question to you: what did you think about? And I don't think there's a lot to say. I'm sure you probably heard the radio, Charles Leclerc after the race, the team strategy, and everything that was going on. I, coming into the weekend, legitimately thought Ferrari, this was going to be their circuit, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And that did not come to fruition. It did not come to pass. And then team orders were kind of into play. You saw a very frustrated Charles Leclerc where the team is telling Charles, hey, we told Carlos not to overtake. And I think at one point, Charles was like, well, maybe you need to tell him in Spanish because he's not listening, right? At the end of the race, obviously, Carlos ended up getting that podium. Very, very frustrated Charles Leclerc. Really, the only question that I have for you is this: we had assumed that Charles had matured, that Charles was in better handle of what was going on. What did you think about, I guess, is it fair to say his outburst? What do you think about his outburst, and what does that mean going into next year where he's not going to be teammates with a Carlos Sainz? He's
yeah,
going to be teammates with someone who's miles,
yeah.
eons better than Carlos Sainz.
And pretty good question, and pretty good closing note, because that actually the note that I'm going to take to open my argument, which is, so not only miles better against someone that smiles better than Carlos Sainz, you are probably going against currently the best driver at playing mental games,
Ooh,
right? So there's drivers that they just keep up with the mental games. Um, Verstappen is a great example. He
yep.
actually was able to support that on 2021, even though he had several breakdowns. Within that fight, if you take races and situations like Jeddah, for example, when he was not able to even stand up in the podium, right? In the podium, right?
Yeah,
He
yeah,
went,
yeah. I forget.
yeah, and they did that on purpose. Hamilton orchestrated that beautifully against Verstappen, and he couldn't stand it, right? And when you see Max Verstappen just cracking down that way, it's because the pressure is so high, and that's what Lewis Hamilton did to Nico Rosberg, for example. That's what he did with Sebastian Vettel when it was a challenger. At some point, even with Valtteri Bottas, when they were, playing the greatest bromance, right, in terms of teammates and stuff.
Yeah,
As soon as Bottas represented some challenge against Hamilton, you could see he's switching into
yep,
um, killer mode, right?
yep.
And yeah, man. I mean, I would not like to be wearing Charles's shoes in that position, because he's not gonna, he's the type of guy. Speaking of Lewis Hamilton, of course, that he takes the helmets off and then he's gonna just, hey, buddy, great job. But then that's just psychological. It's like, what do you mean? What are you saying, man? I mean, you just beat the shit out of
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
and then you're like, great job. Those kind of things. He knows pretty well how to do that. So, um, a little bit of sadness from my side, because I actually thought that we finally got a polished version of Charles Leclerc,
Yeah, same.
um, more mature version. Not the I'm so stupid guys, Charles Leclerc, and then suddenly this happens and against Carlos Sainz, and in the situation that Carlos Sainz is within the team, which is leaving, right? You don't
Yeah,
want to stress out. You don't want to, stress out with your not going to be teammate, right? It's the guy is leaving. You know why he's doing that, and yeah, and actually I didn't like what we saw from Ferrari this weekend, because of just flashbacks of the original Ferrari, right? That we thought that with Vazur they were gone,
hmm
and then yeah, it just opened up the possibility again of Ferrari being Ferrari, right? In the way that we meant to say. So
I,
Yeah.
and I guess I would say Carlos Sainz is probably. You're right. Like, what are they gonna do to Carlos Sainz? Not bring him back on the team? Like he's gone.
Yeah.
So he's like, who cares? The one thing too is that I think Carlos is trying to maximize everything because
Yeah.
he's going to a team next year. If Carlos Sainz gets on a podium with a Williams, it's because everybody else either crashed or they didn't race or they raced a couple times or whatever. Unless
Mhm.
Williams does something crazy and suddenly the car is good again and it's the 90s and whatever, right? With Sainz, it's a situation where I think maybe this season or somewhere, like I think at the halfway mark, Sainz has kind of realized like I was following team orders. I did all of this. The team's still signing Hamilton, making me go somewhere else. So
Yeah.
whatever. I'm just gonna I'm gonna do Carlos Sainz, and I'm just gonna continue winning. I think, yeah, this year, like I said, I'd seen a Charles Leclerc that wasn't making the mental mistakes, that wasn't doing all the stuff that was like typical of Charles Leclerc, and all of a sudden, like whatever happened last night or this morning, man, I was so whatever happened during the Las Vegas Grand Prix, all of a sudden it was just kind of like ah. And you're right, like he has got 3 months, right,
Hmm.
to get everything in order, because I think going up against a Hamilton, and not just and a Hamilton, but I think Verstappen does this in a way too, and all of
Yeah.
like the newer champions do this. Which you're right, they don't on the outset they don't seem mean, they don't seem aggressive, right? And the trap that their competitors fall into is that like, well, this guy's my friend. Like, look at what happened to Lando Norris early in the year. Like Lando Norris was like, yeah, we're pals, we're friends. To
Hmm.
now, I think it was like 2 days ago, he's like, or last week, he's like, well, we're not really friends. I'm actually closer to other
Yeah.
people on the grid. I'm like, okay, sure, guy. Lewis does this, Max does this, the type of person that before, when the helmet is off, they're, I'm a nice guy. Hamilton's always just like joking around. It's like, this guy's really great. He's already
Hmm.
said it to Charles, right? You remember in the times past, he's
Yeah.
already said, this is a generational talent. He's a great guy. He's going to do it. Like all this stuff, they're already talking. And I think the mental game has actually already started between those two teammates, because Hamilton's already, if you see all the pictures, he's already talking a lot to Charles. They're always together. They're always doing all this stuff. And it's kind of like, setting the trap nicely is what I'm going
Yeah.
to say. So Charles has 3 months to get his head in order,
Yeah.
because up until Hamilton's been setting this up for such a long time to say, hey, we're friends.
Yeah. And just quoting the old Sebastian Vettel back in, 2021, he said something to Verstappen, referring to Hamilton's rivalry, which was, yeah, he does that. He lets you feel comfortable first. And actually, he said actually, yeah, like they, Mercedes and Hamilton, they let you feel comfortable. Like they give you the first half of the season so that you enter into some confidence mode, and then they just go hammer time all the way, and they just beat the hell out of you, and it's demoralizing, and that's what happened with Sebastian, right? And that could happen to Charles as well, because as soon as he smells and identifies weaknesses, right, cracks, that's where he's gonna go and take the advantage.
Uh, yeah, I also don't know a lot of drivers who've made other drivers retire because they mentally couldn't handle competing with him. So it is what it is. But yeah, it was a little bit sad. I wasn't mad at Carlos Sainz, right? Like I'm not a Ferrari fan yet,
Hmm.
right? So I wasn't mad at Carlos Sainz. It was like, okay. It was interesting, obviously, that yes, if you look at the telemetry, Carlos Sainz was definitely giving Max Verstappen DRS to
Hmm.
make it difficult for Charles Leclerc to pass. He was slowing down or even hitting the brake at certain points, right? And finally, when Charles was able to pass Max, right, lap 46, all of a sudden Carlos took off.
Hmm.
No DRS for Charles, right? So yes, mind games again. Uh, we shall see what happens with Charles Leclerc. Like I said, he's got 3 months, right, or however many months, right? Because preseason testing is in February, so he's got most of December, all of January, and most of February to figure out, okay, what's going to happen. And I think really the challenge for Charles is going to be the first time that Hamilton tests a Ferrari and he starts putting up lap times in those Ferraris. I think that's when it's really going to be for Charles. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I guess another good segue right now. My favorite topic, obviously, over the weekend, Mercedes, specifically Mr. Wolf, Torger was, and by the way, I say Torger, Medrano and Vince are probably the only people who understand why I don't like saying Torger Wolf's
Yeah.
nickname. So if you say it with an English accent, yeah, sure, Toto Wolf, and that means nothing if you're not
Yeah.
Dominican. I cannot, in good conscience, on the show, so I always say Torger, Torger Wolf. All right.
Yeah.
Over the course of the year, the weekend has been saying just lies. Obviously, and when I say lies, I mean this. He initially said I was blindsided by Lewis leaving. I had no idea. Then he said, actually, I found out from Carlos Sainz's dad. Then he said, no, it was somebody else. Then he said he didn't give us any time to find somebody. No, just kidding. We already had people calling us. Like we
Hmm.
were already looking at Lando. We were already looking at Charles. We were already looking at Max. Okay. Now over the weekend he's saying, it was actually good. Lewis did us a favor because there comes a point in time where a driver starts to get old. He saves us an awkward conversation, blah, 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 this, that, and the third, right? To his credit, to his credit, Wolf is right in one respect. Father Time is undefeated. Okay. But I have not seen from Lewis Hamilton a steep drop off in talent. Yes, his qualifying hasn't been great this year. But everybody's talking about how bad his qualifying is. I forget that he has the record for most poles still,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so for me, the weekend started on a bad note because specifically, I'm going to hone in on a comment that he made about the shelf life of a driver of Lewis Hamilton's age, who is not yet 40, he's still 39. And his comments about Hamilton's age always come up. Interestingly enough, no one ever talks about Alonso's age, even though Alonso
Hmm.
is nowhere in the championship right now, right?
Yeah.
So I guess my question to you, and I think I already know the answer, but it'll be good to hear. What were your thoughts on what Torger has been saying all year long? And do you actually believe? I mean, I know you don't, but do you actually believe that Lewis Hamilton is no longer a competitive driver like Toto Wolff is trying to say?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, we have just gotten the proof, right? It was a lot of overtaking, a lot of great overtakings. So it was a pretty solid performance
Yep.
from Hamilton.
Fast lap after fast lap after fast lap after
Exactly, it's the classic Hamilton, right? In which he used to shout out that, "Oh, my tires are gone," and then fast laps, right? That
yeah.
that simple dummy that he used to do.
Yeah, it's like stop lying.
Um,
Yeah.
and it just proves that if you give him something to cook, he's gonna cook and he's gonna deliver. Um, I believe that Toto Wolff is a pretty good, you know, leader, and with great leadership, to be a great leader, you gotta be a great, you gotta be pretty good at politics as well.
Mm,
You gotta be pretty good at how you phrase things and how you put some pressure, and yeah, it's kind of a strange relationship between Toto and Hamilton, because they are friends, but Toto is also a shareholder in Mercedes.
mm-hmm.
So if you're Lewis Hamilton and you're pointing out bad things about Mercedes, then you're pointing out bad things about at least 33% of Toto's ownership in the team. And all that I understand that Toto is looking to cover and to do with those comments is, first, he needs to protect the team, right?
Sure.
He
Sure.
could not allow the team to be in jeopardy in such a way of not giving Hamilton a great car, or giving great setups to George and things like that. He also needs to protect the staying driver, which is George Russell, in which, you know, protect in a way that the future, I mean, for 2025, George Russell is going to be the leading driver on that team, right?
Sure.
And then
Sure.
you need to do some projections, and you need to, right? And also regarding Hamilton's performance, not at all, because 2021 was not that long ago.
It really wasn't.
It's just almost 3 years, and he has not forgotten how to drive a car. And what, both of them, they went over in 2021. It was pretty intense and it was pretty, you know, yeah, I mean, it was pretty intense. So I don't believe that Hamilton. And also, one thing that, believe it or not, it is what it is, and it is this way. So Hamilton's leaving.
Yes.
Hamilton's got a bunch of experience um, developing cars as well, right?
Yep.
He took off the great Michael Schumacher's, you know, car back into 2013. He developed it, and then yeah, that's what he's done in Mercedes, and that's why, it's not only he has been part of a eight world championships winning streak, right? And he was part of it. And that's a role that he's playing right now. And when you're playing that role, sometimes you sacrifice a little bit of performance because you're the guy testing out things and producing
Yes.
data and giving
Yes.
back feedback so that the other side of the garage can take that, meaning George Russell,
Yep.
and implement that. And then,
Yep.
because at the end, you want to have the most out of the points for the team, not only for Lewis Hamilton or for George Russell, right? And then that's the role that he's playing, and he's playing it pretty hard because he's leaving, and Mercedes knows about that, and that has an impact at least on Saturdays or on FP3s or races. So yeah,
I guess so. I'll take it by parts, right? I think that Lewis Hamilton's exit from the team um, was a result of how the team was treating him at the end, right?
yeah,
I know he wanted
yeah,
an ambassadorship with the team. He wanted to stay on, and yes, everybody's a Ferrari fan, but like realistically, like he wanted to stay with Mercedes, right? Uh, that did not happen. Okay, cool. To me, it's felt all season like Toto Wolff wanted Lewis Hamilton to retire with Mercedes. So it's a situation like if I can't have him, no one can have him, right? And so then the simple fact that like Lewis Hamilton was like, actually, okay, you guys don't want me, Ferrari wants me. And John Elkin said, Lewis, we'll give you everything. You want an ambassadorship, you want whatever you want, come here. All season, it's just been a situation where you see, like, you're right, Lewis's input is used throughout. They look at his telemetry, they all of this stuff that's been helping George Russell out. I think the question for me though, once the season is over, and by the way, like George Russell had an amazing weekend. So like this is not me taking anything away from George Russell. And I
exactly,
think George Russell is very underrated. I think the reason I kind of like I feel whatever about George Russell is like he likes to, in my mind, act like yes, team player, team player, team player until it's time for him to, hey, I want to change the strategy or I want to try this, whatever it is to win. And to be great, you have to be selfish. So I'm
yeah,
not even mad at George Russell for doing that, right? My question though is going to be like, well, what happens next year when Hamilton's gone? And so now George Russell doesn't have any cover, right? So now George Russell is the leader of the team. George Russell should beat a Kimi Antonelli who's coming in, right? And if George Russell doesn't, then what happens? On top of that, like you have Toto Wolff who's for like almost the entire year was trying to get Max Verstappen to come on the team. But it was never I'm gonna bring Max Verstappen and replace Kimi Antonelli. It was I'm gonna keep Kimi, I'm gonna get rid of George. And right. And so like I guess I'll disagree in the sense that like yes, he has to look out for the team, but I think Hamilton's exit has been mismanaged by Total Wolf. Like the whole thing. And I think that next year is going to be difficult for Mercedes only because now you have a leader. Do you trust George Russell to be able to give you input about a car, to be able to help make that car better? Because for the last 3 years, you've been relying on Lewis Hamilton to do that for you. And I thought that like this weekend was so like in Spanish, obviously we have this phrase, right? Un golpe a la mesa, right? Like if you play
hmm
dominoes, just blah. And that was
hmm
Lewis Hamilton setting fast lap after fast lap after fast lap after fast lap. He was in the 135s. I think like the fastest time that he had was like a 135.48 something, right? And he almost caught up. So no part of me says that like if Lewis Hamilton had qualified well on Saturday, he would have eaten George Russell. He would have eaten George Russell up, and then he would have just gone and do that, right? So it's very much like, I'm not gonna say I'm disappointed with Mercedes. What I am gonna say though is, as a Lewis Hamilton fan, and yes, I'm super biased. I don't care. It's my podcast. If you have a problem with this, no, I'm joking. As a Lewis Hamilton fan, the way Mercedes has been treating Lewis Hamilton this year is gonna make it easier for me to say goodbye as of
Yeah,
December 8th.
it could have been handled in a different way, in a lot of ways as well. I mean, specifically, with the comments that has been made, over these weeks against the media, right? You don't need that,
Mm.
because you're not even dispatching Hamilton to run the tests for Ferrari, right?
Oh
You
yeah,
are you are having the guy still running the tests for yourself. So, and you just don't need that. It's such a great relationship. You've had such great success together. It's such a great partnership. So you don't need that. It doesn't need to be ended that way. So yeah.
but here we are. So I guess the last question there about Mercedes and Hamilton. At any point when you were watching the race, did you think that Lewis was going to catch up to Russell and pass him?
No, actually not.
Mm.
Just because of, even though I knew that in other circumstances, if Lewis Hamilton would have, I don't know, would have started some sort of second, third in the grid, I truly believe that he would have won the race.
Yep.
No
Yep.
doubt, no doubt about it. He was the man to beat in this weekend. But yeah, I believe that Russell was at some point managing right at the front, and Hamilton was, just showing the pace and, yeah, extracting the most out of the tire. So if he was to catch up, you know, one thing is just to catch up, and the other one is to
To
pass.
pass. Yep.
So as
Yeah,
soon
you're
as
right.
as
You're
soon
right.
as he would have destroyed his tires, and then George with fresher tires would have, picked up the pace and then just kept him behind. Um,
I guess I don't know. So you're right. I will say, like, all of me was hoping that it was going to happen, because I think at one point it got down to like
yeah.
4.9 seconds. I was like, okay. And then on top of that, like George on the radio saying like, I have grading in my front right. I was like, okay. But then, like, yeah, you're right. I think by the time he realized, either I'm not going to catch him or the tires were so far gone that, like, right, I think there was towards the end, he lost a little bit of control, went outside of the track, and then came back on. And although he caught up to like 4.9, he finished the
Hmm.
race like 7 seconds behind Russell, right? Still great race, still showing like, yes, I can do this, all that,
Hmm.
this and the third. So we'll see what happens. I think it's very unpredictable. I don't think Mercedes is going to be good in Qatar next week because it's going to be hot. I don't think Mercedes is going to be good in Abu Dhabi at the end of the year because, again, it's going to be hot. But also, like I said earlier, I don't think Mercedes knows what's going on with the car. They haven't known on year. So what's going to make the last two races any different? Um, so moving on from that, with the drivers championship finally decided, the second runner up, or the first loser, I guess,
Yeah.
Lando Norris, it's now over, right? It's done. So where does Lando go from here? Is he, will you see a Lando Norris for a title push next year, or will you see a Lando Norris, like, what do you expect from Lando now? Like, what happens to Lando now and the rest of, not the rest of his career, maybe like the next 2 years?
Yeah, and great question, because I do believe that Lando's work should have started, yeah, as soon as he got out of the car. I mean,
Yep.
from Brazil, for
Yep.
example. Um, yeah, I mean, he's pretty conscious about who was he competing against,
Mm,
and he had some real proof about what he needs if he ever wants to have a shot and to deserve a world champion, to be called a world champion.
yes.
So the guy to beat right now is Max Verstappen, and
Yep.
you got a taste of it,
Yep.
right? You had pretty good battles with him, and not only, you know in the race, but also mentally speaking. So that's the way he should go. I think he knows it pretty well because when you see at press conference interviews like the one he did on the United States on Austin, for
Yeah,
example,
yeah, yeah.
he praised Max, and he actually it was kind of a kind of a loser um, mentality back then. He was already
hundred
done,
percent, 100%.
and interestingly, he knew that he was not deserving of that title, and he knew the reasons. So now what he needs to do is apply those reasons. Just work towards the direction of solving those doubts because you already tested what it takes to be a world champion.
Mm, mm, mm.
Probably in another year you could have won a title with that car if Max Verstappen was not in the grid, but he's in the grid and he's gonna be in the grid, and then it's other type of drivers that as well. I mean, if you got a competitive Lewis Hamilton with a car, it's not only gonna be Max Verstappen, so you need to be learning from those guys, whatever you might be missing.
S-
Um, he's got a lot of work to do,
So
mentally speaking.
I will say, I'll ask you this question and see if you agree. So last time when I
Mm.
had Vince on, I asked him, when did Lando Norris lose the championship? Vince said, Vince said Lando Norris actually lost the championship. I think it was Italy when he let Oscar Piastri pass him. I don't know if it was like Lesmo 1 or 2. I don't know. You remember it was like the start of the race.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm. I
Oscar
remember
just
that.
did it was in the chicane, just like a quick,
Mm-hmm.
and he was gone. And that's where, so Vince was saying that's when Lando lost the championship. Do you agree, or do you feel it was either earlier or later in the season where Lando actually lost the championship?
I think it was earlier.
When?
As soon as he doubted himself of becoming a world champion, and McLaren did the same. Yeah, I mean, so it's because it's pretty easy. I mean, if you are one of the top 20 fastest drivers in the world,
Mm-hmm.
meaning Formula One driver,
Yeah.
your main goal should be to win, right? Win races, win championships. And as soon as you see the possibility, whether because you didn't have the car, now you have it, blah blah blah, you need to believe that. You know, you need to believe that because you're competing against a guy that actually believes that he can be a world champion even without having the car. That's what Max Verstappen has always done. He has always been a pretty hard racer, and since the days that Mercedes and Hamilton were dominating the sport, he was pretty bearable saying, you know what, on that car, I know at least 10 drivers that could be world champions. And he was actually pointing out himself as the main guy that if you give me that car,
Yep.
I'm gonna be able. And that's the type of mentality that you should have. And I think that Lando and the team
Does
lacked
not.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, I must agree. I mean, because Monza, all that we see is just a random overtake on lap one, but it was actually more than that. It was you being soft against your teammate, losing the
Yep.
pole position once again, once more, when you should actually could have taken a lot of points to Verstappen, and just because of the position in which Verstappen was put at that race, which was seventh or something like that, if I don't
Mm-hmm.
recall wrong, so it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
pretty far behind, right? And hey, man, that was the race that you should have won. You not only lose the position against your teammate, but you also, Charles Leclerc won that race when he shouldn't.
So,
See, those all just to finish up. Those are like psychological messages or situations that
100%.
even unconsciously, you actually let that sink in, and you just lose, yeah, you just lose some motivation and
So I will say, and you bring up a good point. It's like the last thing I'll say on Lando. When people like Max Verstappen, Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton say, if I had that car,
yeah.
I'd be winning, you actually believe them,
Hmm. Yeah.
right?
Speed.
Because what did Lando say earlier in the year? of course, you're supposed to win. You had the fastest car. Now
Yeah.
it's my turn now. And
Mm-hmm.
what Lando learned, so that to me, like, didn't like ingratiate Lando to me, but all that said to me is like, okay, Lando, you have the fastest car, and you're about to find out that it's not just having the fastest car.
Yeah.
So go ahead. And what I saw from Lando, I was like, okay, so it's a lot of this, and not a
Yeah.
lot of just like actual like whatever. So again, like you're right. Like the champions, when they say that, like yes, if I had that car, I'd be winning. And
Mm-hmm.
it's few the ones that are great. You're like, yeah, absolutely. Because how many times this year that we say like even Lewis Hamilton said it himself, right? Like if I was in that McLaren, I'd
Mm.
be winning more races.
Yeah.
Even at if you even want to bring in Fernando Alonso at 67 years old or however old he is right now, if you put Alonso in that car, same thing, right? And so for me, Lando was the type of driver that yes, he has definitely got to increase his mental fortitude. I think this year taught him a lot about that. I think he's going to be tougher. The problem for Lando though is that next year he's got a George Russell that's coming. He's got a Charles Leclerc that's coming. He's got a Lewis Hamilton in a more consistent car. And yes, he is able to beat his teammate over the last 2 years, but nothing is stopping Oscar Piastri from coming back next year
Yeah.
and being a challenge on it, right? So it's not like, and we're not even talking about the rookies that are coming in, right? The Behrmans, although obviously
Oh.
Behrman's in a Haas, so
Mm.
or an Antonelli who's right, and so we'll see. I think Lando will eventually win a driver championship. I don't think it's next year or the next one. I think we'll see. It took him 5 years or 4 years to get his first victory. So we'll see from there. Okay. So to close it out, I want to talk about somebody who had a lot of hype, but lately has not been doing. And I will say, by the way, credit to Entrando A Pits for saying this because I didn't actually know this until I was watching the show. Franco Colapinto. Let's talk about Colapinto quickly.
Yeah.
Everybody, myself included, is very hype. I continue to be very hype. Love Franco. Franco is the guy who does a lot of this, but
Yeah.
it's hilarious to me, right? And obviously, for the last 7 races, all that's been said, you got to keep Colapinto in for 2025. You got to get Checo out of here. You got to put him in Sauber or Audi. You got to put him in Red Bull. You got to put him in RB, whatever. But the last two performances, or I don't even know how many performances, and this is where I say shouts out to Entrando Pits. I didn't realize that Franco Colapinto has cost Williams almost as much money as Logan Sargent in half the time.
Yep. That is correct.
So here's my question. Given Colapinto's recent performances, do you think teams are still interested in him?
Yeah, that's a tough question because you are as good as your last race in Formula One.
Yep.
It is harsh, but it is true, right? Um, and here, yeah, I mean, 7 races, and you're competing against Logan Sargent, which was replaced because of the reasons that you are actually,
Yes.
you know, reproducing, right? And you have no seat um, as of now, and you are in a context of a team that to which budget and money is actually a big thing
Yes.
because
Yes.
it's not Red Bull, it's not one of the top three, top four. It is a team that has struggled financially for the past years, and it's since they since that United States group acquire them, then they've just surpassed that situation, the financial
Mm-hmm.
situation. But then you are also next to a teammate that is also costing the team some money. So you're contributing. So you are wasting one opportunity because if your teammate is costing money, money to the team, then you should just go conservative and do the opposite. As simple
Bare,
as that.
bare minimum. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then you're not doing that. You're joining your team on that. At least you're also beating your teammate, which is good.
Sure.
But it is a mix of variables. and definitely no one wants to hire someone that crashes so often.
Yeah, and I'd say that's a little bit different too, right? Like with Albon, I don't think Albon actually feels pressure. So I've
Exactly.
in the past I've said, oh, Albon's in trouble because Colapinto, and again, Colapinto's like right now, all right, it's like a mirage for me, right?
Hmm.
Because he started really good, and I'm one who has said like, okay, so if Albon is struggling to do good against Colapinto, what's going to happen when Sainz comes in?
Yeah.
But recently, what I've started to think about is like maybe Albon literally does not feel that same type of pressure. Albon has a seat. Albon has a long term contract. Albon has the financial backing.
Yeah.
So maybe we're not seeing the best out of Albon because he's just like, okay, Franco, go ahead, buddy. Like, do what you got to do. Like, I'm
Hmm.
just because yesterday Alex Albon DNF'd. He didn't even finish the race.
Mm.
And the
Yeah.
week before, he same thing. Didn't even race, I think, in Brazil. So it's very much like. So I guess you don't think teams are high on Colapinto based on his like you're right. You're only as good as your last race, and the last two have not been. He finished Vegas, but he crashed in FP3, right?
Yeah. Um, yeah, definitely. I mean,
Or
and
qualifying, yeah.
yeah, FP, yeah, FP3 actually. Quali, yeah, quali.
Yeah,
Sorry,
quality.
yeah,
Yeah,
Q2. Um, so I think there was a lot of hype. I think the guy has a pretty attractive commercial part, which is
yeah.
also
Mm-hmm.
important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then you don't want to be crashing because you're just hurting yourself against other teams. It's like whatever you had built up to this point, you're putting that in jeopardy because of crashing the car. And I can understand because crashes they don't come from nowhere. So he was pushing the car in
Yep.
Q2. He was
Yep.
really pushing the car, extracting the maximum out of that Williams to try to put some time together to make it into Q3. But yeah, then you got other drivers such as Lawson, such as other drivers that they're also pushing, but they're not putting the car in the wall. So it's I do feel that whoever was attracted, it's now getting some sort of a taste of the
Yeah.
reality because it was expected. I mean, whoever believes that the guy would have was not going to make mistakes, what's wrong? It was
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
matter
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
time,
Because
right?
he's still a rookie. Yeah.
We were not calculating that were going to be these mistakes, like mistakes that were going to be introduced to money. Um, but yeah, the other teams are just getting a taste of the reality of, yeah, I mean, he's not that good. I mean, he's not worth of all of that money. He's good, but he also crashes, and yeah, it's kind of tricky to him to be put in that situation.
I think to wrap it up, I think it's gonna take really strong I'm like really strong performances, and I'm not talking about like P10. I'm talking like a P8, P7, and I think
Yeah.
that's gonna be hard for Colapinto to get back up to the point where teams are like, yes, I will pay $20 million or whatever you want to have him on the team. It's got like that's where I think Colapinto is at currently, like
Yeah.
real like generational performances from
Hmm.
Franco Colapinto these last two races for him to actually really get that the team to commit to him. Because you're right, who's gonna sink money into a guy that's yes he scored more points than Logan Sargent, but he is
Hmm.
costing you as much as Logan Sargent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right, hey Medrano, so we have come to the end finally, and so something we like to do on the show is talk about the best and worst performances, and again, for the third episode in a row, I don't have to explain to Medrano, who was your for the Las Vegas Grand Prix? Who was your pariguayo of the race?
Um, I don't know, man. I mean, I would say my Paraguayo of the race could be actually Piastri.
Oh,
because after what you've seen in Brazil, the sprint race, the message that he sent to the team, like, yeah, I'm gonna give you that to Lando, but I should be the
Mm-hmm.
number one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they're making those such silly mistakes. I mean, not only the fact of being absent, not being like performing at quality, not performing at the race, you know, but also doing that silly mistake in the grid was, something that
The false start. Yeah, yeah.
should not be happening and should not be doing, right? If you want to actually fight Lando and be the number one or whatever, right, for McLaren. And actually, yeah, he did had a,
It was a very
bad
forgettable
race.
race. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
dang.
and he's been absent actually in the last couple of races. But yeah, I mean, he didn't do any great impressions on this race. He was
Yeah,
overtaken a couple
yeah.
of
Dang,
times.
dang.
Um, and
That
yeah, he didn't actually gave Lando a hard time. So
that you know that's a good call out. Oscar Piastri's performance in this race was so bad that I completely forgot Oscar Piastri was in this race.
yeah,
Dang. Okay. Oscar Piastri, Pariguayo. Okay, so for the Las Vegas Grand Prix, Oscar Piastri, Pariguayo. Who was your matatan for the Las Vegas Grand Prix?
yeah, I think we could agree, right? Lewis
One
Hamilton,
hundred percent.
all
Yes.
hundred
Thank you.
percent, man.
Yes.
Even more than I know about your Russell. I mean, but he okay. So he did a great start, Russell, and he defended pretty well against Leclerc. Um, but yeah, man, I mean, what Hamilton did was just the old classic Hamilton that we were all expecting.
Just letting him
Um,
know I'm still here.
yeah, I'm still here, still got it. Um, I pass all of these guys. I pass them twice. I pass Verstappen. And if
By
you
the way,
give me, if you
if you
give me
give me a car,
tires,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
if you give me tires and a couple more laps,
I
yeah,
will say probably. Uh, so Medrano, I know you are an F1 veteran. All right. So I
thank you.
will say this, even though it meant absolutely nothing, it was really nice to see Hamilton pass Verstappen on track
Yeah,
so easily. And when they kept showing that replay, I was like,
yeah,
it means nothing to pass Verstappen right now, but it's still you love to see it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It felt delicious.
yeah.
I
That
must
was very,
say, in
very
in the
cathartic.
race, I was like, yeah, friendly man. Yeah.
So, all right, yeah, I agree. Lewis Hamilton, Matatan. Right. So we have come to the end, Medrano. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you very much for coming onto the show. For those who don't know, please tell them where they can find you on YouTube.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube, Entrando A Pits. You can find me on Instagram by Medrano 21. And yeah, I normally share a lot of Formula One content among other things. And actually, yeah, thank you for having me. It was such a nice pleasure, such a nice
Oh
conversation
man,
being
thank
here.
you, thank you.
And yeah, I wish we can do this once again in the future.
Oh,
So yeah.
100%. Hey, I got to get everybody on here, or eventually I just got to go back to DR and just be. Anyways, all right. Yes. So that is the end. As always, please comment, like, subscribe, tell your tios, your tias, abuelos, abuelas, vecinos. For the Monoplaza F1 podcast, I'm Miguel Tre. This was Emmanuel Medrano. Peace.